This is the Nike Tiempo Legend 10 Elite, the rather controversial most recent Tiempo Legend release from Nike, because if you didn't know, the Legend 10 is no longer leather. There's no K leather, there's no calf leather, there is no leather at all on this upper for not quite the first time ever, but close enough. And the biggest controversy here is that it's here to stay. It's not a one-off. The Tiempo Legend will be a synthetic boot from here on out. What is the upper instead? Well, it is this. It is Flytouch Plus, which is designed to mimic K leather as much as possible while taking away some of the downsides of leather boots. And yes, I'm gonna say it, leather boots have downsides. The obvious ones being leather boots can overstretch, they can retain too much water, it's very difficult for manufacturers to retain a structure within a leather boot, and of course, depending on what side of the fence you're on, there's of course environmental and animal things to consider. That's a topic for another video entirely. So how good is Flytouch Plus at mimicking K leather? Well, it's okay. And by that, I mean, it's okay at mimicking K leather, but as an actual upper material, it's bloody fantastic. So what you've got is there is even an element of kind of leather grain that's been applied to the boot to try and mimic it as much as possible. It is stupidly soft, like really, really soft. Now, I've said that, for example, Hybrid Touch 2 on the Preds is soft, and this is definitely softer than that. Where you start to come away from that leather sensation is in things like this is definitely slightly tacky, and it's not a bad thing for an upper to be slightly tacky. It just means that it's not like real leather. Now, I don't necessarily see a problem with this. You've essentially improved upon something that maybe leather was lacking, but if you're a leather purist, you can't compare one to the other. There are some elements, some sticky elements on the medial side of the foot as well, just to assist with control and things like that, and they just, again, add to that grippy, slightly more sticky, textured element that is on the Legend 10. Now, it's nothing like what you're going to get on the GXs, but it's definitely noticeable if you were to compare it to a natural leather boot. Softness, I think, kind of is comparable, to be honest. Now, obviously, once you've got half a season's worth of wear in your K leather boots, they may indeed break in and be softer, but they may also lose more shape. Whereas these are going to retain a bit more shape. They might not break in to be as soft, but out of the box, I'd say they're pretty damn close, like pretty good, and overall really impressive. I think this is a really good material, and if this is where Nike is starting from with the synthetic for the Tiempo, then this is going to go really well, I think. The touch, in my opinion, is pretty K-leather-esque. It has just like a delicate amount of padding, yet compared to a modern K-leather boot, which are generally on the thin side, there's still a good amount of touch and feel coming through the upper. Is the touch the same as K-leather? It's similar, but it lacks something. It lacks some element, maybe that like je ne sais quoi that a special leather boot has, but it's still brilliant. It's still brilliant. Along with the Flytouch Plus, you've got this centerpiece, basically a Flyknit tongue that fills in the middle. It gives you a really nice fit. It's not overly compressive to the point where it's uncomfortable, but it definitely keeps you feeling locked in. The only small issue that I have had is that where you have these areas here, the lace holes that just connect here, these kind of flare a little bit. I can't seem to get them tight enough to wrap into the top of the boot. They kind of flare out a bit. So they could do with maybe just being moved a little bit either up or back in order to be able to pull the whole thing in. It's not a huge deal breaker, but for a boot that's not built for lockdown, the lockdown is good, but it's not a speed boot. It's not really holding you locked down in place. It's just overall fairly seamless, fairly comfortable. and a boot that you can kind of forget about when it's on your feet, which sometimes is the highest praise you can give. And the same lockdown theory applies to the heel. The heel lockdown is good. It's comfortable, there's no pressure points, there's a nice little cutout in the back here, which again is going to stop the likelihood of you getting any blisters. The Soleplate is incredibly Tiempo. If you've ever worn a Tiempo Soleplate before, this just screams Tiempo, and it matches up beautifully. The bladed studs in the back, all conical through the front of the boot now, and it's great. It's really, really good. It's very, very Tiempo, and it fits with the whole boot. It's great for AG pitches as well, in my opinion, although, of course, FG boot shoes and AG pitches invalidation warranty. But at the same time, I've not had any problems using these on AG at all. There's no real pressure points or anything like that. It's nice, plenty of freedom of movement. The conical studs are great. And yeah, this is very Tiempo. If you do want to pick up a pair of Tiempo Legend 10 Elites or any of the Tiempo or Nike lines, please use the links down in the description and in the top pinned comment, because it helps support the channel and doesn't change anything about how you buy stuff. It's very much appreciated. Thank you very much. We're going to talk about the fit, and then we're going to get into my thoughts on what's happening with the Tiempo and how Nike could have avoided the issue that they're in, and genuinely how good I think these are. So the fit is fantastic. If you have a wider foot, these should fit you fine. If you have a narrow foot, you should be okay. If you have a very wide foot, probably not for you. And the only thing I don't like is that the toe box is a bit square. Kind of feels a little bit odd. Not a huge fan of that, but I can absolutely get over it. And lengthwise, they are some of the most spot on Nike boots that I've bought recently. These are US 8, and the sizing is like inch perfect for me. So I would recommend sticking with whatever you would normally buy in a modern Nike. Now, why the negative reaction to the Tiempo? Well, because it doesn't have K-leather, and a Tiempo Legend has core building blocks that you expect to get when Nike make a new one, and one of those absolute core building blocks is a K-leather upper. It's your expectation. So I understand why people are mad that the Tiempo doesn't have it anymore. I really do. Do I think people will get over it? I think a lot of people, or most people, will get over it. And those that won't get over it, let's not worry about that anyway. They're probably angry at everything. But the issue is not in the boot. The issue is in nothing more than the name. And a few people have said this, and this isn't necessarily the most mind-blowing thought that anybody's ever heard, but if Nike had released this and called it a Nike CTR 364, people would have lost their goddamn minds. Even this being Flytouch Plus, they could have called it Kangalite Plus or something like that, and just had a little bit more of a throwback to a CTR synthetic control boot, and people would have gone crazy. This would have sold out. People would have loved it. This would, I don't know if I've really got across how good I think this boot is. I think this boot is so unbelievably good that if it was called a CTR 360, this would have been in boot of the year contention. People would have been speaking about this as if it was a boot of the year. That's how good it is. But people have got so wound up by the fact that it's not leather, and the general community of boot heads and even people just generally buying boots are wound up about it not being leather. So people are kind of a little bit afraid to praise it too highly, I think. I think this should have been in boot of the year contention. I'm not saying it should have won, but it should have been in those conversations and much higher up those top 10, top 5 lists. And it would have been had it just been called a CTR 360. And I think had Nike done that, they wouldn't be in anywhere near they're not in a mess. They're selling loads of boots, but people wouldn't be so wound up about it. They'd have been much better received, and I think they'd have sold way more units of this. But I digress. Break-in time. I didn't mention it. Like 10 minutes. Nah, honestly, one session, done. Broken in. Happy days. They're so good. Go out and buy a pair.